Hello friends, I'm Kerry Farr. Welcome to In Your Corner. You know, about 10 years ago, I was getting ready to teach a Sunday school lesson, and I was going to teach out of a quarterly. It's one of these little books that the Sunday school board sends to church, and you go through it, and you teach the lesson. And as I was reading that lesson that morning, I was appalled, and it's much worse today. I read 10 years ago that 50 million children had been aborted in the United States since Roe v. Wade was made legal in 1973. And all of a sudden I felt very guilty because in that period of time, since 1973 up until 10 years ago, I had only stood out in front of an abortion clinic one time and did anything to, help those innocent children. And so since that time, we've had numerous people on who have talked about abortion. And today we're going to have a discussion with some of the most amazing guests we've ever had on In Your Corner before about the subject of abortion. And I want to say right up front that, it affects almost every family in America today. And we're not condemning. In fact, we know that we serve a God that is very forgiving. And today, if you're still suffering from the pain and shame of having an abortion, we're going to share some stuff with you that will help you understand that you can find forgiveness, that you can find freedom from guilt and shame. I want to introduce our esteemed guest today. To my immediate right is one of the most iconic movie stars of the 1970s. I think she was the first supermodel, starred in something like, I don't know, you'll have to tell me, Jennifer.
40 movies.
40 movies. I remember many of them, especially the summer 42. But, you've written 7 books. You're involved in so many things, and we'll let you share that with us today. But
sure.
What an honor and a privilege to have you on. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story.
And I love your hair color.
Well, I resemble that remark, where ours is
We're
very
the
similar.
oldie but goldies here.
That's right. And
That's right.
I'm glad I'm still around.
Me too. I'm very thankful.
Yeah. And to her immediate right is our friend Victoria Robinson, who's been on before, pro-life advocate, and has an amazing story. Has done some amazing things in the pro-life movement, and we can't wait for you to share your information. And then, and next to you is Dr. Jack Monaco. Dr. Monaco is an OBGYN and is doing some different things in medicine today. And Doc, we'll let you share that. In fact, we'll just go to you right now.
Okay.
You and I were talking off camera, and you had an experience as a medical doctor with abortion. It changed you from being pro-life, to
Pro-choice.
Pro-choice.
I've got it mixed up. Go ahead and share the story,
I say that
Doc.
all the time. I do.
Well, I trained in a Catholic hospital by choice because I did not want to be in a situation where I was forced to do abortions, which a lot of the other hospitals that were not religiously affiliated made their residents do. And I was chief resident, and I was on call one night, and there was a doctor, he was a Jewish doctor, and he trained at our hospital, at a Catholic hospital, but he did the abortions in the area. I was in Hartford, Connecticut. And I got a call from him, and he said he was sending a woman to the emergency room who he had started to do an abortion on, but misjudged how far along she was. And he said, "You need to complete this." And back then, you did what the doctors told you. Your attendings told you to do something, and you did it. And so I said, okay. So we brought this patient to the operating room. I told the scrub nurse, I said, this is not going to be nice. I said, I understand if you want to leave. And so we started to do this, and I was pulling out fetal parts, identifiable fetal parts. It was horrible. And I went down to the chief of the department the next day, and I said, this stops today. I said, we're never going to ever do this again. We're a Catholic hospital. We shouldn't be doing this. And as far as I know, it never happened again. But it was a horrible, horrible experience.
Yeah, it's and that brings you to a stark reality there, doesn't it, Doc?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Vic, why don't you share with us a little bit about your background and your experience with abortion?
First of all, I love that you called me Vic because we go way back, and my friends call me Vic. But I unfortunately got involved as a pro-life advocate because I chose abortion over 30 years ago. I was a single mother with 2 little girls, and my husband at the time decided he didn't want to be married anymore. So he basically said goodbye to all of us and went from North Carolina to California, got as far away from us as he could. And I met a man at one of my 2 jobs that I had to start working because I couldn't barely take care of them without any financial support from their dad. And I fell madly in love. My self-esteem was shot, which happens to women when your husband says, I don't want to be with you anymore. And all of those things you can imagine, I felt. So when this man came along and said everything I needed to hear, I got involved with him, and 9 months later I was pregnant. I was a single mother, already struggling, and the abortion clinic that I called in Charlotte, North Carolina, talked me into believing there was nothing there but a blob of tissue and a clump of cells because I was early in the pregnancy. And she actually said to me, after I shared my story with my husband leaving and struggling with 2 little girls, she said, you'd be really selfish as a mom to do this to your daughters. And this is the best choice for all of you. And we can take care of this right away. You can leave here and never think of it again. And our government would not allow this to be legal if it could harm you in any way. And she lied to my face. Everything she said was a lie. And I walked out of there a different woman than the woman who walked into that abortion clinic.
But you've been on before, and I remember you telling me then, Victoria, that you went into a room afterwards where they let you recover, and there was a lot of pain and grief there.
The whole room was filled with these makeshift beds on the floor, and not one bed was empty. After the abortion, they take you in this room and they give you a couple Tylenol and say, stay here for 30 minutes. You can leave in 30 minutes after we make sure there's no complications. I lasted about 5 because the women in there were just, it was something I'll never forget and I never want to see again. They were bent over, they were crying, they were screaming, looked like they were in shock, and I grabbed my things and got out. So yeah, it's as I said, a sight and sound I'll never forget.
But you and I have talked about this before, and you wrote a book called They Lied to Us. Tell us a little bit about how they lied to us and where somebody can connect with you and get this book.
Well, you can connect with me on my website, victoriarobinson.org, and you can get the book on Amazon right now. It'll be on my website as well. But I wrote the book because after I went through abortion healing, which was not until 10 years after choosing abortion, and that's a whole nother long story, I decided more women needed to know there were options other than abortion, and they needed to know the truth. So I wrote the book to share other women's stories of why they chose abortion and how God delivered and saved them and redeemed their life, like He did for me. And that's why I wrote the book. It's now in its 5th print. I have a second book coming out called They Lied to Us Too, T-O-O. That's the men's stories of how they've been affected by abortion. Right. That's the thing we don't talk about enough, Carrie. And when I called the father of my aborted child to tell him the book was coming out, because I knew he may find out about it, I wanted to make sure he knew there were no identifying factors in the book about him. When I called him, it had been over 10 years since we'd spoken, because we broke up after the abortion, which happens to 9 out of 10 times with couples who choose abortion. They don't stay together. It's too traumatic to remind themselves of what they did. When I called him, all I said was, hey, it's me. And he knew my voice. He was crying so hard I couldn't understand what he was saying. And he said, when I finally got him to calm down, I've been waiting for this call for over a decade to beg you for forgiveness for what I made you do. I should have protected you and our baby, and I failed you both. And I've been in therapy 8 years dealing with it.
So it not only harms the woman, and obviously the child's gone, but it affects the man as well.
Absolutely. Up to that point, Carrie, though, I believed the lies that the abortion industry tells women and the media says, which is, it's not your place. You sit down and shut up, mister. It's not your body. And it's not her body either. So there's a scientific fact everyone should know, is the baby is both of those parents' body. So what I found out in that phone call, number one, was how affected he had been all these years, and I didn't realize that. I thought he'd gone on with his life, and I was dealing with all the ramifications of our choice, but he wasn't. He was in turmoil. And the second thing I realized was I can never go anywhere without speaking to the men and letting them know, I know you're hurting, and you deserve healing as well, and it's not fair that we make this issue all about women. And when you think about it, the abortion industry is very good at doing that, because they know if men rise up and take their place and say, that's my child too, and start fighting or telling the woman, I'll support you. Yes, because a lot of men don't say anything because they're afraid. Well, it's her choice, it's her body. That's what they told me. No, sir, it's your baby too, and you need to fight for her. Because most women walking into abortion clinics just need the father of that baby or someone to come along and say, I'll support you and walk through this with you.
Yes.
You're not alone.
Right.
And they wouldn't walk in.
That's amazing. And Jennifer, you know, Victoria mentioned something very interesting, healing. And I know that you're involved in works of healing today, and you were such a gigantic movie star and model. And today tell us what you're doing today to offer healing, but give us, your connection to abortion as well.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I came to my faith in Jesus Christ at 38 years old. So I was living in Hollywood and living that life and didn't have a clue what God had to say about the abortion issue. I married at 17. I was a cover girl for 30 years. I divorced 6 years later. I had my daughter and went through depression because of postpartum depression.
Yes.
So I went back to New York City and met, just like you, a man that I thought, after the divorce, that I fell madly in love with whom I'd spend the rest of my life with. And there's a reason that God says, wait. Because you really have to know, getting to become intimate with somebody, babies can happen. It takes two to tango. And every voice has a voice, from the child to the father and the mother. I was thrilled. I became pregnant. I even asked the doctor to write down when I was due, and I went down to see the dad down on Wall Street, and I put the note on the table waiting for him to look up and smile. And he just looked at me and he said, you're not going to have that, you're going to have an abortion. That was stunning to me.
Rejection too.
Well, the percentages are 85% of the individuals, women, girls, are coerced in some fashion to get an abortion, whether it's parents who want them to finish school. The truth wasn't being told then. Abortion had just become legal. I didn't have my faith in Christ. I didn't know about alternatives. And I was coerced. I mean, I was threatened. But that doesn't matter because I folded. I couldn't protect. We are not designed to kill our own. And it's offensive to God. But I want to tell everyone who's listening that if you've suffered an abortion, that God has your babies, according to the Bible, according to the story of David and Bathsheba. And there is reconciliation and wholeness in Christ. So there is healing. And if you've suffered this, you can become a billboard for the truth. I started working with an organization called Silent No More, which they were one of the first organizations to really embrace the men's story. And I know that your audience is very much men. And there are, to me, three categories, and I'm going to do a movie about that as well. There's one category of the man in the situation with an unexpected pregnancy who does not support. He just kind of says, he's just neutral. Jesus will spit out lukewarm. It's not, if you say, I'll do whatever you want, what you're saying is, I don't want, as a man. I'm not going to be there for you. The other person is adamantly, you're not going to have that. And then the lies started, just like with Vic. It's just a blob of tissue, a cluster of cells. My doctor told me that. It's not, it's a baby. With the advent of the ultrasound machine, we can hear its heartbeat, we know it's humanity, and 85% of girls or women who hear that see an ultrasound, which, by the way, Planned Parenthood turns away the screen, so you can't see the humanity of your baby. You're carrying a baby, not a blob of tissue. The second group of men are the ones that just don't want to have anything to do with it. And the third group is heartbreaking. It's these dads, their dads, who actually have no say of what the woman does with their baby. And it's my body, I'll do what I want, and they suffer horribly. It's their child, and they want that child. They should have a say. They should have a
Yes.
waiting period. They should
Yeah.
have a lot of things. It is a moral issue. It is a moral issue, abortion. And we will pay for it in this country, over 60 million
I know.
now.
It's
and we have to step up. An oxymoron, I've talked to Dr. Jack, my friend, head of the board of people we help in the military, that it's an oxymoron to say that you're a Christian and that you're pro-choice.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I don't understand it, but if we, on a myriad of issues, don't start standing up for the values, what is your yardstick of values? It comes from the Bible.
So profound.
But you can heal. You can heal.
You can heal.
And become a billboard.
Amen. Well, let me ask this next question. I want us just to have a discussion. Either one of you can speak. You know, today, the woman decides she wants an abortion. Sometimes the male is not like the ones that you two knew. He wants to keep that baby. What happens when he has no say?
They get the abortion.
They get the abortion.
And they suffer.
Laws need to change.
Yeah.
A man should have a right to save his child. And as I said though earlier, I think when the men step up and they start to empower themselves with,
Right.
wait, that's my child too. Think about this, Carrie. When a woman chooses abortion and realizes, whether it's at that moment she's so vulnerable, and the abortion industry preys on her vulnerability. They know she's vulnerable. They say everything she wants to hear. When I gave that woman $350 cash, that was so kind to me, showing me such compassion, speaking to me in this sweet voice, as soon as she had my money, she put it in her drawer, shut the door, looked at me and said, if you change your mind when you're on the table, you don't get your money back.
Oh.
That is just
So that's the
crazy.
abortion industry. It's wicked, but they prey on your vulnerabilities, and that's what they're doing
They
to
don't
women.
also talk about, if you don't mind my popping in,
No.
the aftermath of abortion.
No, they never tell you
They
that.
don't tell you the truth. Higher rates of addiction, suicide, miscarriage, health
Promiscuity.
problems. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You are sentenced to higher rates of cancer.
Yes.
And so the woman's physical body goes through that, her emotional and spiritual body, but the man is equally affected if that's his stance. And sometimes years later, like your guy.
Yeah, because the thing is, men were made, God made them to protect, to take care of their woman and their children. They weren't able to do that. So whether they chose, drove her, paid for it, talked her into it, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Eventually they come to the realization, that was my baby. With a woman, it's, I'm a mother. I wasn't created to kill my children.
Right.
Yeah.
So when she comes to that realization, listen, we've been healed. Jen and I have gone through after abortion recovery. That does not mean it ever goes away. You know, people look at me. I've had young women say, Victoria, I've been following you and watching you, and I admire you. So I'm going to have an abortion because I'm too young to have a baby. I know I'll be okay. And then I'm like, don't you dare use my abortion to condone your abortion. You don't see me on the floor still, 30 plus years later, crying out to God, why didn't I make a different choice? Why didn't you stop me? And I have those moments still. It never goes away. You
But
just
he
live
forgives
with
you.
it.
You
He
receive.
100%.
You know what it is, Vic? It's pride. If you don't receive the forgiveness of Jesus in all the other places of your life, but you don't receive it in abortion, as I did, it took me 10 years. I thought the heinous act that I had allowed in my life was bigger than what Jesus did on the cross.
Yes.
And it's not bigger than what Jesus did on
Amen.
the cross.
It's not.
There is forgiveness for abortion, and it's imperative that people know, because then they can be a true voice for the children.
Carrie, I was one of those three men.
Yeah.
Okay, when I was in my training, I was going through a divorce, and my girlfriend got pregnant. She ended up being my wife, and she's the mother of two of my children. We're no longer married, but nevertheless, she got pregnant, and all I thought about, I'm not divorced, I have a career in front of me, what's it gonna look like? And so I'm at a Catholic hospital, you know, and all this. So I told her, I said, I'll do whatever you want to do. If you want to go, that's your choice. But I was secretly hoping that she would go, and she did. Okay, I was not with her. And I think that affected our marriage for the 25 years that we were together. And the doctor that did the abortion is the same doctor that I was talking about that sent that patient into the emergency room. Same doctor, okay?
Jack, I didn't know that.
Well,
Wow.
And you had an experience because you were pro-choice and something caused you to become pro-life.
Well, I did. And he told me, he said she was bleeding. He said, I think she was going to miscarry anyhow. I think he may have just said that to ease my pain. But I was raised Catholic and I was pro-choice because I didn't really understand what that meant. And being a gynecologist, I was a proponent for women's rights. So this patient comes into the office and says to me, doctor, are you pro-choice or are you pro-abortion? I said, well, I'm pro-choice. She said, then you're pro-abortion. I said, no, I'm not. I believe a woman has the right to choose.
Right.
She said, well, her choices are birth or abortion, so therefore you're pro-abortion. And we bantered back and forth for a couple of minutes, and then finally I stopped and I looked at her and I said, you're right. I am pro-abortion. And from that moment on, I became pro-life.
Wow.
I said, there is no choice other than abortion.
And it's never too late either. My parents, I went to my parents and they told me the best they knew, that I could always have another child. But in their 80s, I wrote a post-abortive healing section and asked my dad to translate it. And in their 80s, they had to read the book, get a translation Bible and all of that, and announced to me that they now were pro-life at 80 years old. So it's never too late.
Yeah.
There's always the option of adoption. There are huge amounts of organizations around that can help you through this period of time. But really think it through. I seriously think there should be a waiting period.
Oh, for sure.
You know, that is enforced. They make you wait for a license.
Yeah, everything
Come
else.
on.
Well, you know, we've got a little over 3 minutes left. Let's focus on in the time that we have left. You know how many people out here hurting, you know, because of the pain and grief and shame of an abortion. What would you say to them?
I'd like to say something to the pastors.
Oh, good.
Ooh, nice.
So I want to go there. They can go somewhere else because the church is failing their congregants who are sitting in their churches because 1 out of 3 people has had an abortion in this country. And when they don't hear their own pastors addressing this issue from the pulpit, they're sitting there in their grief and their shame and their guilt, and they are reiterating to their congregants, to those people sitting there, yeah, see, even my pastor won't even talk about it. That's how bad it is. That's because he knows God won't forgive me for that one thing. So I want to say to pastors, I challenge you to, I won't say what I want to say, but I challenge you to start doing what God's called you to do, which is speak the truth. And you need to be speaking about abortion from your pulpits.
You want to be bold and stand up for the...
If you're, and I have pastors say to me, Carrie, when I ask them, hey, let me come speak to you in your church. Well, Victoria, we don't have that issue here.
Yeah.
Some of our people here are pro-choice. I don't want to offend anybody. It is time to offend somebody,
Yes.
okay? And when you do it in the right way, especially about this issue, God will honor you for it. And the congregants will be happy you did it.
Yeah.
Because when I am invited to churches, they're coming to me and saying, I can't believe my pastor finally brought this issue up. I've had an abortion. How can I get help?
And you only have to tell one person. I'll stay on that theme, that it has to be addressed, it has to be spoken of, and it has to be understood. And I had the great pleasure of speaking with Women of Faith on the road. And they're a great organization, and they actually said to me when I was preparing my speech, don't bring up your abortion. We want the women happy. We don't want to shame anyone or do anything. I said I have to, or it's my story, it's part of my story, a big part. And so I did very quickly. You have a little period of time, and the women lined up, and they had 70 years old. I'm 73 years old. I can't imagine not dealing with that issue, and lined up in tears saying, no one's ever talked about it. I need to tell. I've never told anyone. I said, now you can heal.
Carrie, to Vic's point,
Yeah.
if the pastors don't do it, God will.
Yeah.
That doctor that I was
might be judging our land now
doctor that
because
I was
of it.
telling you about,
Of course.
there was
Yeah.
another abortionist at the University of Connecticut. Both of those doctors have suffered severe strokes. Okay, the doctor that I knew, as far as I know, if he's still alive, he's in a wheelchair and he's non-functional. And the doctor at the other hospital is also suffered a stroke. So God will do it if the pastors don't.
Yeah.
I think the pastors have to do it, but the doctors also have to do it.
Yeah, we have to stand and have to take a stand.
Yes.
Unfortunately, my dear friends, we're out of time. Thank you so very much for sharing your story and standing up for life. And friends, I want to say to you that if you're feeling the guilt and shame of whatever, abortion, murder, whatever it is, God can forgive you, cleanse you, save your soul. The Apostle Paul was named Saul before he became a Christian. And he was arresting and having Christians murdered. This man was a murderer. And God struck him down on the road to Damascus and said, "Why are you persecuting me?" And Saul said, "Who art thou, Lord?" And I believe it was at that point that he yielded himself. And the Lord said, "I am Jesus Christ, the one that you've been fighting against." And at that point, Paul gave his life to Jesus Christ and won half of the known world to Christianity in those days, and wrote about half of the New Testament. So if God would forgive him and forgive these, he'll forgive you. Asking the Lord into your heart is as simple as ABC. A, admit that you're a sinner. B, believe that Jesus Christ died for you, was buried and rose again. Then C, confess your sins and ask him into your life, and he'll save you. And when you do, contact us at inyourcorner.info and let us know that you've received Jesus Christ. Again, I want to thank our wonderful guest. It was such a blessing having you on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And friends, we'll look forward to seeing you again next week on the next edition of In Your Corner. Friends, thank you for watching the program today. Recently I was in a small town in Tennessee, and in this town, they have a drug plague. They were losing 3 people in a small town in Tennessee per week to death from overdosing on drugs. It was just an incredible problem. A local judge went to all of the churches and said, "Our court system is just inundated with drug cases. Our jail's overrun, we just can't handle it." And a group of 12 churches across denominational lines got together, and they formed a coalition. They opened a Hope Center where they started bringing these young men and women in off of the street and helping them overcome addiction. And I was down there just recently and was at a church service and saw about 20 of these young drug addicts at the altar. Miraculous things are going on in this town, and this city is winning their town back to Jesus Christ. It's miraculous, the things that we saw that are going on down there. Our hearts were so impressed that we are going to do a documentary called Hope Lives in Hohenwald, because we've seen hope rise up and conquer death there in this community. And we're going to be working on this in the next couple weeks. If you would like to be involved in helping us finance the work of the documentary, it takes a lot of money. Go to our ministry website, inyourcorner.info, or mail your donation to P.O. Box 218425, Nashville, Tennessee 37221, and help us save lives and save souls in this little town. And not only will we do it there, we will share with this documentary what's going on there so that you can do it in your town as well.